Well, good morning, everyone, and I'd like to call to order and welcome you all to our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, May the 4th, better known as Star Wars Day. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Councillor Mastarakis.
Yes, Madam Mayor. 11G, the Continuous Improvement Plan project, we have properties that may be affected by that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Noted, and I know that the paperwork has been received as well. So today does mark our first daytime council meeting, and certainly this virtual platform that we've been attending the last 14 months allows for the public to watch our council meetings at their convenience. So we've noticed that some of our neighbors have gone to daytime meetings over the last number of years. And so we're trying this out as an experiment. Obviously, we're meeting this morning, and we've got another meeting scheduled for a morning, I believe it is in October. So anybody that is watching this live or watching it back in playbook, watching the playback at your convenience, we'd certainly be interested in what your thoughts are as to whether or not you think a daytime meeting is a good idea and how that would engage the public. Anxious to hear what you think. This week is Mental Health Week, and as has been stressed so many times during the past 14 months, there are many stressors and triggers that have been brought on because of the restrictions that have been imposed. The isolation many of us have experienced, and the balancing of work, school, home in this new virtual world. I encourage you, should you be experiencing changes to your mental health, to reach out to your healthcare provider, a community resource, or a trusted friend or family member. If you see a family member or friend struggling, please be that support to guide them to a resource. Sometimes it takes an effort. You know, when you ask someone how they are doing and they say, "I'm fine," there's likely more to that story, and that could be a sign to dig a bit deeper. I attended the St. Joe's Breakfast of Champions this morning, and I was once again reminded that we all have a role to play when it comes to mental health awareness and mental health matters. Let's all be the community that we want, and let's take the stigma out of mental health discussions. Pivoting to COVID, vaccination availability opens up considerably on Thursday, and I would encourage you to go to the Middlesex London Health Unit website to see what demographics will now be eligible for vaccines in our region as of Thursday. It's important to remember that once you become eligible for a vaccine, you are always eligible. That being said, because so many demographics are opening up on Thursday, if you are already eligible for a vaccine and you haven't booked your appointment, I encourage you to take the time today and tomorrow to book that appointment. Because obviously, as more people become eligible for the vaccine, the harder it will be to get an appointment through the mass vaccine clinics. Vaccinations are not the only answer to solving this pandemic and getting through it. We must still adhere to all the protocols. It is our responsibility to still be physically distant, to get tested if we have symptoms, to stay home, to keep our bubble small, to wash our hands, to wear masks, and to get vaccinated. When we get out of this, there will be a huge debrief. And in the years to come, people will look back and they will want to know how we stepped up to the challenge. What do you want your role to look like when people look back to see how you helped get us through the pandemic? Think about that, adhere to the protocols, wear masks, get a vaccine. Okay, moving on. We do have a presentation today Surprisingly, we don't have a closed session. I think there's been a few meetings since we haven't had a closed session. But we do have a presentation, and I am pleased to welcome Brenda Slater from MPAC. She's the account manager for Zone 1 with MPAC. And it's great to have you with us, Brenda. I'm sure that your presentation will garner lots of discussion. And at this point, I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm just pulling up my presentation. I hope you're able to see it there. I appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak to everyone. This is, I think, the fourth presentation I've done in Middlesex, as well as I've presented to Middlesex County. So as the mayor had mentioned, I am the account manager for Middlesex County, Elgin County, and St. Thomas, the City of London, and the municipality of Chatham-Kent. So as you know, MPAC does assess and classify all properties across Ontario. And when we looked at how that assessment database is broken down, it was interesting that 90% of all properties actually fell into the residential property class. And then it just shows in terms of the number of properties and the assessment values straight across all the different major property classes. Looking specifically at the township of Lucan Biddulph, this information is actually based on the 2021 taxation year. So this is your assessment base for this year. And this was shared as an assessment change report. Those reports went out at the end, in the fall, they went out to all finance departments. And then in early January, we shared those with all heads of council and council members as well. So it's presented to you as a percentage of your total assessment base, and then as well, the current value assessment. And again, that's for this year. You've likely seen this graphic, Ontario's property assessment and taxation system. And it's important that we share the message in terms of the different roles in the system overall. And the Ontario government, the Ministry of Finance, sets the legislation that dictates how MPAC completes the assessment. As well, if there's any changes to tax policy, those are all at the jurisdiction of the provincial government as well. Certainly also they set the legislated valuation date and also the timing for any assessment updates. MPAC, as I mentioned, we assess and classify all properties in Ontario in accordance with the applicable Assessment Act and the associated regulations. And property owners who have questions or concerns about their assessment value, we always encourage them to reach out to us directly. And as you know, municipalities are working with those assessment values to determine local property taxes. Any property owners that have questions specifically about their property taxes and how those are calculated, we would suggest they reach out to their local municipality. In terms of the next province-wide assessment update, in the Ministry of Finance spring budget, they announced that the next assessment update would be paused once again as a result of COVID. So as you know, it was paused for the 2021 taxation year. It has now been paused again for the 2022 taxation year. As well, in the budget, they indicated that they will be conducting consultations with MPAC, with municipalities, and the results of those consultations should be shared later in the fall. One of the things that they mentioned is that they also have the ability to look at the timing. So that's referencing there will be another legislated valuation date. But when we think about the timing, that's going to be when the next assessment update will take place and what that assessment update will look like. Will there be phase-in? Will there be no phase-in, et cetera? So there's a lot of those crystal ball questions that were being asked. And as we move through this, the rest of the year, we're hoping that there'll be more announced in the fall in terms of timing. So just as a reminder, our current valuation date is January 1, 2016. So that will apply to the 2021 taxation year and now the 2022 taxation year. When properties are, even though there's no assessment update, when properties are changed, whether that be we're out capturing new assessment, whether property owners have made an inquiry about their assessment and there's changes, we're still reassessing or assessing those properties as of that same consistent valuation date. So everyone is based on the same date. It's January 1, 2016. Sharing just our role in the building permit process, absolutely we did have to sort of shift gears and look at different ways to capture new assessment for municipalities as a result of the assessment update being paused, and then also, of course, with the announcement of COVID-19 and those various restrictions. So right now, with everyone being in lockdown, all of our field work has paused. So we've relied very heavily on municipalities to provide us with electronic building permit plans to help us capture that new assessment in a timely manner. And Lucan Biddulph has been fantastic. I did have the number of plans we've received from Lucan Biddulph in my notes. I just can't see my notes on my screen. But there's been no issue receiving our monthly building permits from the township of Lucan Biddulph. There's been no issue receiving those final inspection dates, those occupancy dates, which really helps our staff to prioritize the work that we know is complete and ready to be assessed. And then also the ability for us to receive those electronic building permit plans that really helps us keep the assessment work going, and there's no delay in us capturing the assessment. Right now, we have about 191 building permits on file for Lucan Biddulph, and those are all 2020 and 2021 issued permits, which is great. So that means that we're working current. And we are on track for capturing the new assessment forecast that we've set out for 2021. So every year we set out a forecast. We look at how much new assessment is available and is going to be ready to assess this year. And then we also have to take into account, as I mentioned, our ability to capture that. And we are certainly right on track with Lucan Biddulph to meet our target, our forecast. It's very much in line with the forecast we provided and the amount of new assessment growth we provided in 2020 and 2019 as well, which is great. And right now we're sitting right about at the 50% mark of the forecast for 2021, which is good because we're just at the beginning of May. And we're sitting at 87% of that new assessment captured within 1 year. So some really, really great metrics, which is nice to see. And we certainly appreciate the support from the municipality as well. So long-winded on that one. Just briefly, as I mentioned, anytime that we make a change to property assessment, we do send out a new assessment notice to property owners. All of those changes are captured on assessment rolls themselves that are delivered to municipalities. May the 8th is the first date that we're mailing assessment notices for property owners where we have captured new assessment, so where we've assessed a new building permit. So this will be the first extract of property assessment notices for building permits since the fall. So anyone that we've assessed since the fall. And again, those notices will be January 1, 2016. About my property, we know that you do get questions from property owners. And as I mentioned, we encourage property owners to reach out to our office. We set to redo or overhaul About My Property for the next assessment update. And even though it paused, we did go ahead and make all of those improvements. So I do know that property owners find the overall experience and the use of the site and the ability to find the assessment we have on their property compare their assessment to others in their neighborhood. The entire process has really been streamlined, and it's been helpful as well. The system does also allow the opportunity for property owners to file a request for reconsideration. It's free, and you're asking MPAC to review your assessment. I would note that please be very mindful of the deadlines. So March 31st is the deadline to file a reconsideration for this year in general. Property owners who have just received a notice or will be receiving a notice from us during the year. So in that May 8th extract, for example, the reconsideration deadline will be clearly noted right on their form, and it's 90 days from the date that we mailed that notice. The other thing to keep in mind with the reconsiderations as well is that if property owners are citing COVID-19 as the reason for filing their reconsideration, there is no change to their assessment solely as the result of that. And again, it goes back to that valuation date of January 1, 2016. But there could be other data issues, there could be other concerns about the property, and absolutely we'd be taking those into account. So I would encourage them again just to reach out to us if they have questions, and we'll certainly work through that with them. The 2020 Municipal Partnerships Report went out earlier this year, as well as our 2020 annual report. And it really focused on how we were able to keep that business going. We did reach out to municipalities at the beginning of COVID and asked, what is your expectation of us? What would you like from MPAC? And the number one thing was to please keep the business going, to just keep our work going. So that's why we've really shifted gears and looked for new ways to capture that new assessment for you, to ensure that your assessment base is still there. And again, the support that I've received from Lucan Biddulph and right across my municipalities in Middlesex has been fantastic. Last slide. Hope I'm on time. I'm always so long-winded. But we're very excited. Our offices are closed to the public. We are going to be closed right through till September, so everyone is working remotely. As I mentioned, our field work is paused, but we are still available. We are still working. I do encourage you to subscribe to our monthly In Touch newsletter. The last one really got into detail on how we're handling requests for reconsideration, if potentially there's tax applications as a result of COVID. Interestingly enough, for the municipality or the township of Lucan Biddulph, we only had one request for reconsideration for 2021. There was no change, and we have no outstanding appeals, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of great information in the In Touch newsletter. Register for any one of our monthly webinars if there's a topic that you find of interest. And I'm always available to help as well if you have any questions or concerns. And that's actually all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that overview, Brenda. Any questions or comments from council members at this time? Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, Brenda. Question. So if you've got the freeze for 2016, your existing homeowners since before that versus a new build, does the new build get assessed on the pricing from 16 or on current pricing?
So at this time, every assessment is still based on January 1, 2016, even the new build. Yes.
So second question, has there ever been, the prices have been rising, as we all know, in real estate a fair bit. Has MPAC ever done an averaging or a different calculation rather than point in time, or is it a point in time measure that's done?
So it's always a legislated valuation date. The key will be once we know what the new valuation date will be, And once we know when the next assessment update will actually take place and what the timing will be, as I mentioned, whether there will be phase in or no phase in, et cetera, then we're able to set those parameters so that we have that group of sales that we'll be analyzing to determine those new values. So again, it's all about right now keeping our information up to date, keeping all of the, the data accurate on our properties so that we're ready to go when we get those dates and we hear that announcement.
Right. Yeah, one of the thoughts I have around that is people that are applying for credit currently, and part of their expenses are property taxes, and if we're using 16 valuations and all of a sudden the property taxes go up 30-40%, that on top of an interest rate increase, that has a huge impact on budgets for people managing their expenses.
Yes, thank you for the comments. Like I said, this is those crystal ball questions are sort of the number one thing that I've been getting, and we're certainly waiting to see as well what that next valuation date will be, and we need a little runway to get that assessment update completed. So it's a little bit of a wait and see as we get into the fall and hear some more announcements. Absolutely. Okay,
thank you, Brenda.
Ron, did you have a comment to pipe in at this point?
If I may, Madam Mayor, thank you. It's going to be an interesting exercise because, of course, we all know what's going on and what's been happening with the residential rates. One would argue that the farmland rates have not gone up near the percentage that residential has gone up. It's anyone's guess as far as commercial property and industrial property, how those values have gone up. But in theory, if everybody's property increased by 30%, your taxes wouldn't necessarily go up, right? Because your portion of the pie remains the same. But if the residential goes up and everything else stays the same, it's understandable that your residential property tax is going to increase. What that percentage is, I guess that's a good question. But it's the interrelationship between all those different sectors that's going to be the interesting factor. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Regan, you have a question, comment?
I have three questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first of all, again, I might be repeating what Councillor Mastarakis asked. Just for me, on slide 3, special exempt. What does special exempt mean?
So with the special and exempt, we've included any property that is currently exempt on the system. So municipally owned properties would be an example of properties that are exempt. Hospitals as well, schools. And the special properties are those that we consider to be payment in lieu. So they have a slightly different calculation. Common examples of payment in lieu would be your LCBO properties or Canada Post properties, for example. So those we've lumped together as special and exempt.
All right, and if I may, Madam Mayor, thank you. So the second one is on slide 6, and I just want to be absolutely clear because I did have a concern from a resident, actually two, one on Watson and one on Nicoline, and I'm the one on Nicoline. So just to be clear that the property values are going to be assessed again on the January 1st, 2016 rates, because the resident asked me the other day, said that their house has gone up 42%, in the last year. And he said, well, my tax is going up. And of course, not everybody understands the ins and outs, and I'm one of those. So I just want to be absolutely clear when I speak to this resident or any resident that asks me about this, is that their properties are being assessed on what the value was January 1st, 2016. Is that correct? To make sure I'm absolutely clear about that.
Yeah.
And anybody that's watching this, by the way. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you for the question. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you didn't. No.
Sometimes I get off mute a little quicker than that. Absolutely, yes. So it's January 1, 2016. So for properties for the 2021 taxation year and now 2022, there will be no change to your assessment value unless we've gone out and we've done, a new building permit on your property specifically, or we've gone out and done a change specifically to your property. but it would only be those ones that we've actually gone out and made a change. Otherwise, everyone else, their values will remain the same for 2022.
Okay, I apologize if that was a repetitive question. I think that's very important. That needs to be very clear. And just really finally, the other question that came up was, so with the increase in house prices, and then once the dust does settle, and my house is now worth 42% more than it was, and that's sort of the fixed price. Is there any consideration from Impact to look at that, or are they just going to assess at that new value? Like when I'm thinking about, I think 4 years from now, when you're going to do this again, are we now looking at that 42% increase if it stays at that? And I don't know what's going to happen to the housing market, but that's a concern too. So I don't know how that would be addressed, or if that's even an issue.
Yes, thank you for those comments as well. You're right. It's going to depend on what valuation date is set, whether that we were all set to do the assessment update based on January 1, 2019. That was to be the next assessment, and it was going to be for 4 years. So now it will depend on what date the ministry sets, whether it be January 1, 2019, 2020, 2022, et cetera. And then also what that timing is going to be. Are they going to hold the 4-year phase in? Will that shift as well? And again, once we know those dates, then we'll be able to really set in and finalize those values, whether it's at this year or next year, et cetera. So, and the phase in does equally phase in any increases as a result of an assessment update. So if they maintain the 4-year phase in, we'll continue to do the same thing. If that changes, then there may be, differences in how property owners see those changes. The other thing too, I was just thinking while I was talking, is there are some videos on our website. They are available on impact.ca and as well about my property that really shows that relationship between assessment and taxes. And if assessments change, how that would impact. So they're a couple minutes long, and they really sort of help to put things in perspective in terms of how those assessment values relate to your property taxes and potential shifts as well.
Okay, good. I'm all about education. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. I think the Deputy Mayor had his hand up.
Yeah, I've got just a couple of questions. So just when people do call their counselors or staff on their assessment and are upset and they want to discuss it and they call our township, the response is, thanks for calling, you called the wrong number. And they give them your number. That's correct?
We do encourage property owners to reach out to us directly. Absolutely. So,
Yep,
or if you reach out to us as well on there, we get both. Sometimes property or municipalities will reach out to me and say, can your office contact the owner? And we can certainly do that as well. So whichever is easier.
Because our staff really plays no role in it. Like, all kidding aside, they called the wrong number. Glad you called. Here's the right number.
Mm-hmm. And if you direct them to the 1-800 number, the 1866 number, our customer contact staff can typically answer a lot of the questions. And then once it gets to be very property specific, that call is filtered down to the field office and one of our local staff. We're based out of the London office. We will reach out to the property owner directly. So,
and on a reassessment, can the person that asks for a reassessment after the investigation by Impact, can it also go in reverse and actually get assessed higher than they were complaining about?
So, yeah, thank you for that question as well. With the request for reconsideration, the idea is that we're getting that assessment correct. So in the situation, if we went out to the property, we're reviewing the assessment and there was something that was incorrect and we changed that, then it may change that assessment perhaps up or down. The idea is, the nice thing is as well, I would encourage property owners, if you go into About My Property, you can see all of the data elements that we have on your property, if you've got your finished basement or whatever the case may be. And sometimes that helps just to make sure everything looks correct. I don't see any changes. I've looked at comparables, my assessment's in line with others, and there may not be that need to file the reconsideration. But you are correct. The idea is to make it accurate. So there could be changes in either direction, potentially, I guess.
Is there any, last question, is there any tools in the toolbox that our staff and impact can work on? I mean, you see more and more, and we've got a couple properties I feel in Lucan where I want to say instead of, you know, these investors or millionaires buying properties for their portfolio, maybe no intent to develop it for years and years, which really sucks for a municipality. Is there any way to at least have our community reap the benefits of an applied higher value there, since I do feel they're acting that as part of their portfolio?
Yeah, thank you for that, the question as well. Depending on what property type you're referring to, we
Commercial.
do have to, oh, a commercial, okay. So with
Empty land.
just a couple of comments. If the property is sitting as vacant land, our assessment would be based on the zoning. If the property is built on, our assessment would be based on the current use. So depending on what it's being used for, that should be how the assessment is reflected. If it's been purchased, you know, for development down the road or changes down the road, those changes likely would not be captured until we see that change in use. So if it's currently being used as a retail store or a restaurant, et cetera, that is how it would be assessed. So it does depend on, now where other property types that are based on sales, we do the assessment based on sales. That's when a sales investigation needs to be done to make sure what is it that they purchased it for? Why did they pay a higher price? What are the circumstances, right, surrounding? But it doesn't mean that there'd necessarily be a change in the assessment as a result of that sale right away.
So so there is no, again, if it's just part of their portfolio, again, stocks, gold, land, and they're just going to sit on that for 10, 15 years, 20 years, it does hurt our municipality on not developing it. There is nothing that you can think of in zoning or anything to not force them, obviously, to build, but at least create more revenue for our community. So there really isn't anything.
That I'm aware of. I'm not familiar with anything. I mean, the other option is reach out to our office and we can have a discussion about a specific property. I'm giving sort of general overview of what potentially would happen. But if there's something specific about a property that you would like us to look into, by all means, the municipality can certainly reach out to us to review and discuss.
And then I guess I have one more. You had mentioned you're still working on 2020, I think, assessments for Lucan Biddulph, I believe. And then, so what, it is May 1st, and I believe you stated that you're happy that that's up to date. I don't, it's 2021. I don't, in my world, maybe that's not up to date. So that's up to date in your world. So what's not up to date?
So our commitment is to capture new assessment, whether that be a new home, et cetera, new construction within 1 year of occupancy. So that is typically what our commitment is. That's our corporate commitment for all new construction, is to capture within 1 year of occupancy. So ideally, that is what we're working towards.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from council? I guess, certainly I think it's been made very clear about the current valuation date, and I think our residents really need to be mindful of that. There's been a lot of talk about, the current situation that our housing values that we're all experiencing. And, certainly appreciate the constraints that COVID has put upon, the MPAC office. And I'm, really pleased to hear that you're still getting all the information that you need from Lucan Biddulph. And, from Lucan Biddulph's standpoint, business has never stopped. And so we have continued with the business of the day. And, I guess with the business of the day continuing, then, and this obviously, since it's legislated, was taken out of your hands, but perhaps maybe the schedule of the current valuation should have continued, because certainly it could be troubling, and it could be, sticker shock, depending on how new valuations are rolled out and when that actually happens. And municipalities are missing out on revenues. That's one way to look at it. But then, of course, as homeowners, we don't know what that's going to look like when the province finally decides that it's time to get back to business. Pivoting to the other role that MPAC has with the voters list, I think that from Lucan Biddulph's standpoint, we've done a great job at keeping our voters list up to date. I know Lisa DeBoer, in her role as kind of managing elections for the municipality, was really diligent on updating the voters list, and probably went above and beyond exactly what her role was to make sure that it was an up-to-date voters list. And I guess my question is, how can we be satisfied that the voters list that MPAC is actually going to produce for the 2022 election is accurate?
So thank you very much for the question. I'm wondering if I'd be able to get back to you with a response on that. And the only reason I say that is I was focusing on the next assessment update and whatnot. And we do have an enumeration project team, and we do have some information available and on the work they're doing to prepare for the next enumeration. If I'd be able to share that with staff and council afterwards, if that would be okay, so that I make sure that I can pull some. I'm not as up to date on the work that we're doing in that regard here this morning. So if that's okay, I will pull some information together. And
that is perfectly fine. I mean, the election actually, even though it's in October of 2022, will be upon us, and that whole cycle upon us before we know. And I know that many of our neighboring municipalities had real concerns with what their voters list looked like as it was produced by MPAC. And there was certainly lots of discussion in the year following the election. So anything that we need to do ahead of time to make sure that we've got an accurate voters list, I think is great. So if you can follow up with that, that's great. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
One last call for questions or comments from council. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Brenda. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay. Moving on to our minutes in front of us. And we actually have a number of minutes that have been circulated through our regular special minutes and, of course, closed session minutes. And just wondering if I assume everybody's had a chance to review those. And if there is nothing to be amended or added to those minutes, just looking for anything, then I would ask for a mover and seconder for the following motion: resolved that the following council minutes be approved as circulated. The regular council minutes for April 20th, 2021, the special council minutes for April 15th, 2021, the regular council minutes for April 6th, 2021, and the closed session council meetings for the following dates: April 20th, 2021, April 6th, 2021, March 30th, 2021, February 23rd, 2021, January 29th, 2021, January 5th, 2021, December 15th, 2020, and December 1st, 2020. and a mover and seconder for those, please. Councillor Mastarakis and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And those are carried. And moving on to the business arising. Everything is ongoing. I believe that Ron will be speaking to the fire service master plan later in the meeting. And I think that Paul has a verbal update on the ice chiller efficiency. Was there anything else that council wanted added to business arising? Okay. And moving on to correspondence, as always, we've received a number of items over the last few weeks. There has been one that has been pulled, and it was an email that was sent to all heads of council regarding consultations for the upcoming possible changes to the code of conduct. I will be attending those consultations on behalf of the County of Middlesex. It had been my intention to ask the Deputy Mayor to attend ours, but I know that Councillor Mastarakis has expressed an interest in attending. So certainly, yeah, Peter.
I would support the Deputy Mayor if he wants to do it.
Yeah, I was interested in doing it. If my schedule, I need to confirm that, then I would reach out to yourself, if that's all right. I would do that.
I believe it's just an hour session, and they're being broken into 2 different times, but it is just an hour session. And of course, there is a link in that email to the body of the email to participate in the online survey as well. So if we can then just have a verbal motion, maybe to have the Deputy Mayor go, and maybe if it doesn't suit his schedule, then Councillor Mastarakis could be the alternate.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Regan, and a seconder for that, Councillor Westman. Is there any further discussion on that one? I didn't really open it up, sorry. Councillor Regan.
If the Deputy Mayor or Councillor Mastarakis can't make it, I'll go. Okay. I'll be the backup. I'm not used to being on the third line, guys. I'm not the third line, but just in case. But yes, I make that motion.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And again, I would encourage all council members to participate in the online survey. Were there any other correspondence that was received in the last couple of weeks that council wanted to speak to? Okay, then if I could get a motion to accept those items of communication for information. Councillor Westman and Councillor Mastarakis. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to committee reports. Lisa, CEDC.
Yes, good morning. The committee has not met yet, but maybe just a quick update on some projects you may see upcoming in the next little month or two for downtown. We have some art projects coming. We've purchased some Adirondack chairs, and the local businesses will be painting those. So those will be coming up probably in June, and then some other projects as well. There'll be a new mural that will be painted on the side of Typad. I think the artist is the same one we've always used, and he probably will be coming out sometime end of May and June to start his mural. So you'll just kind of see some things popping up in the next couple of months downtown, so it should look good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Lisa, any questions for Lisa? Councillor Regan.
What will the mural be, or is that a secret?
It's not a secret. We're finalizing the drawings. It's going to be, instead of an actual historical thing that we've done, it's just going to be more of kind of a happy scene in a way, colorful and bright and nothing specific. So it's going to be just I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. More of just a design.
Okay.
Sort of
all right.
thing. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Blue water. Nothing from Lake Huron. Fireboards, nothing from there. ABCA and Upper Thames. Councillor Westman.
Yeah, we've had both board meetings. The Sauble Bayfield, we've been doing a lot of hearings lately because of some of the impact that shoreline management has had on local property owners. As I brought up before, the shoreline along Lake Huron is literally falling into the lake. So a lot of properties are being affected up there, and it's quite significant in some areas. So what we're looking at is, the erosion mitigation efforts and how that impacts the property owners. So that we've been doing a lot of hearings there. One takeaway from the Upper Thames, and we do this through Sauble Bayfield, is source water protection. It's a lot of technical information, obviously, but one thing that really stuck in my mind is what we as individuals and as businesses and as the municipality, what we do to protect our source water. Everything we put in the ground and into the drain and down the toilet does have an effect on our overall water systems in our environment. So, I guess I'll beat the dead horse a little bit by saying that, number one, our toilets are not garbage cans. So, we don't flush medications, we don't flush chemicals. We don't put anything down there that isn't supposed to be down there. When we're doing farming practices or businesses, industry, we need to be very conscious of what we put out and how we manage our waste so that it doesn't have an impact on the rivers and streams and drains and the lake, because that's where our drinking water comes from. So everything we put down the drain ends up coming back through our tap. So we need to be very conscious of that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Councillor Westman. Deputy Mayor Manders, a question?
Yeah, Alex, just wondering on the shoreline protection, I'm always curious, is there landowners, if you can't answer this, it doesn't matter, or, in the future, is the expectations of the landowners for the government to mitigate and fix that, or they work with landowners for correct mitigation and bill the landowner, or is it us ratepayers in Lucan Biddulph paying for a portion of that?
Well, that's actually a really good question. So it's kind of an interesting process. So what the Conservation Authority does is they help to regulate how mitigation is done. So you can't just go and throw in a bunch of rocks or whatever and that's enough. There are particular engineering processes that have to happen, and it's done at the property owner's expense. So there's no taxpayer money going into that, because obviously the benefit is to the property owner. So what happens is a lot of the neighbors will get together in a particular area, and they'll work on sharing the load of getting mitigation structures in place, like whether it be these big metal panels or stones or concrete blocks. I can't say that I'm an expert by any means. I don't know that much about it, but when we do cover that, it's there's groups of people that come together for the hearings, and they're all interested in being able to do whatever they can do, but they have to meet certain engineering requirements in order for it to be legal, because you don't want to have some guy who thinks he knows what he's doing putting up a structure that's going to fall into the lake or fall onto somebody walking by. So it's quite interesting when they show us pictures of some of the stuff that people have attempted to do. You have to wonder. I'm sure it's in their minds, they're thinking it's a really good idea, but the power of all that sand and earth and the water is beyond comprehension. It's amazing. I mean, every gallon of water weighs 10 pounds, and when it's moving at 30 or 40 or 50 kilometers an hour, it has a tremendous amount of power. So and the lake levels have risen to such a degree that a lot of places where there used to be 100 feet of beach, there's none. And a lot of properties are losing upwards of 1.5 to 2 meters of their yard a year to the erosion factor from the lake. So there's a few property owners along the lake that are really in some big trouble. Now, there's been, over the years, there's been various different groups that have done mitigation projects where they've put up, break walls and things like that have been very effective. And, they're the lucky ones, but quite a few of them are now kind of reacting to this big change, and it's quite a thing. So.
Oh, yeah. No, they're just the expenses. You answered that question. That's good. No, it's going to be interesting if the mitigation that's recommended and done properly, because it must be hard to know what mitigation won't fail, and if it's failed in 5 years from now or so, it's going to be an interesting thing, because it must be very hard to mitigate. But no, you answered my question on that. So on who's reports. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of very talented staff that have lots of experience and knowledge in that. And it's not just the authority. There's the local municipality is involved in that as far as permitting and things like that. So.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Parks and Recreation, Paul. Oh, now you've unmuted, but we can't hear you. Nope. Okay. It's weird. You're not wearing earbuds?
Paul, do you
have your earbuds?
Try a set of earbuds with a microphone and see if that works, Paul. If you've got a pair.
Okay. Well, we'll let you work on that and we'll circle back to you. Okay. Okay. Moving on to staff reports. Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first of the two reports I have in the council package tonight or today is the Fire Services Master Plan. So the purpose of the report is to provide an outline of the process involved in moving toward a Fire Services Master Plan. Council will recall that both fire boards passed motions recommending to council that they consider the undertaking of a Fire Services Master Plan. And council did take that under advisement. They actually allocated $60,000 in this year's budget towards that end. One of the big outstanding questions right now is what participation or what role will Perth South play in this? And I guess there's three options. They may opt out completely. They may want to join us with the same consultant under one sort of umbrella, or they may want to do their own separately. So we need, before we can actually move to step one, we need to know what their participation or lack of participation is going to be in our process. So that's kind of the question where we're at now. I know I've reached out to Perth South. I believe the mayor was going to talk to the mayor of Perth South to try and sort of coax them along a little bit to find out an answer to that question. But once we find out an answer to that question, we can move to the next step. And the next step is really getting the two chiefs and the fire board chairs together to draft the RFP. And then once that moves forward, we hope to get that done and out to the consultants for circulation, probably late summer. Hopefully that goes to, gets brought back to council and gets awarded by council in September, October. And then the amount of time that the consultant would need, hopefully we're looking at the report submitted to council the end of this year or the first part of next year. So that's kind of the timeline outlined there. It is quite intensive. I've seen, I think Warwick's master plan was over 100 pages long with I think 109, I believe, recommendations. That might be a little overkill maybe, but it's different consultants do things different ways. So it'll be interesting to see what comes back. But there's a number of items that they look at, not the least of which is fire risks and hazards, fire protection capabilities, public education, fire risk reductions and management, community preparedness and response, as well as funding and fiscal measures related to fire protection. So it does look at everything, and it tries to involve everybody, and that's a time-consuming task for sure. So it's not. I want to be clear to council. This isn't a 3-month process. This is a long extended period of time. So, and thank you, Madam Mayor. That's my report on that one. If anybody has any questions, I'll try and answer
Any
them.
questions on that? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ron, I know that it's going to assess our current assessment, like it's going to take a look at us now. Is it also going to look at the future? If that's, I hope that's not an obvious question, but is it like our future needs as well? Is that a part of that review as well?
My understanding, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Regan, my understanding is that they will look at population projections and everything. So it's an all-encompassing plan. So it will look at everything.
All right. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ron, do you know the time frame of some of the others? I guess RFP might take 6 months, let's say, and then from that, it could be a year to get something like this done, or do you know just ballpark or any examples?
It depends on the consultant, really. It does, and you know, they can be shorter, they can be long. So I think it depends in part as to who council decides as the successful consultant. So, and it might be more expensive if we choose the one that's a little quicker time frame. It may be less expensive if you choose the sort of one person show, and that takes longer to do. So the best way to answer it depends. It depends.
I guess, could that not be, you know, a target date for finishing could be part of the RFP. I think we've done that with, you know, our rec plan and everything, where we've set out kind of timelines and said we would like something completed by X date.
Yeah, one of the matrix could be price would be, you know, awarded for 20 points. Timing could be maybe more awarded more points in the overall scoring. So.
Okay. Any other questions on the fire service master plan? So that was just for information. If I could get a mover and seconder to accept that report for information, please. Councillor Mastarakis and Councillor Westman. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, next one, Ron.
Thank you. The next one is an update with regards to the Phase 2 Lucan Community Memorial Center project. And again, the purpose of the report is just to provide an update as to where we are. Obviously, council remembers back in, I believe it was the end of March, we had an announcement from the province that we were successful with our funding request. So between the federal and provincial governments, we are going to be receiving in excess of 5.5 million towards the expansion and renovation of the what we call Phase 2 of the Lucan Community Memorial Center project. As part of that, we received the draft transfer payment agreement from the federal and provincial governments. It's quite an extensive agreement, and it requires that every part of the project go through a competitive bid structure. So what that means is that even the engineering, which kind of runs contrary to what we're trying to do, because most of the engineering is complete. Obviously, the final engineering and the preparation of the tender packages and the construction supervision is the remaining components of the engineering section of the entire project. So we did reach out to the ICIP team. They're the administrators of the project. There is a section in the transfer payment agreement where we can formally request an exemption to any parts of that process, which we technically could do. However, the provincial ICIP member said, because the value of the exemption for the engineering is in excess of $100,000, it would have to be signed off by the federal minister, and that would take upwards of 3, possibly more months of time. Obviously, you know, we're under a fairly tight restriction as far as the timelines and the timelines that we submitted to the province said we're to be shovel ready. It's a bit of a head scratcher, but I mean, the federal government's a large entity. They have, they've been hammered recently with the SNC Lavalin issues in Quebec. So, there was more rules that came in, and I think we all can understand that. But there's always little parts that don't quite fit into what we want to do. So we are going through the process. There is a in the tenders and quotes section on our webpage, we do have the tender documents out there for the engineering, assumedly, and it would make sense that Spreetz would be the cheapest because they've got most of it done already. We'll see what happens, but the tender close is just before the next council meeting, so we hope to have those tenders open and a motion prepared for council for the next meeting on the 18th. The mayor and I were sent the final transfer payment agreement document yesterday, so that will also come to the May 18th meeting of council, and we'll continue to move forward. It's we have to play by their rules, and we will play by their rules and move this project forward and make it happen.
Hey, any questions for Ron on the phase 2, where we're at? Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this might be a Paul question too, if he's able to speak.
He's signed in maybe with his phone, Peter.
Oh, good. At the last Parks and Rec meeting, one of the volunteers, community members of the committee, asked about potential added costs to the construction costs that have changed. So we were quoted $7.5 million. That's a couple of years back now. I know lumber's maybe moving at a different price than concrete and steel, but even for the capital campaign, if we understand now what the difference is between the $5.5 million, is it now $8 million total project, $9 million total project, or is there some kind of rough estimate we can get based on the increases of materials so we can start our planning?
Who might have an answer to that? Maybe that's one of those crystal ball questions. Ron?
I can take a stab at that answer, Madam Mayor. At this point, Councillor Mastarakis, it's a bit of a crapshoot. We're all going to guess at what the price will be until the actual tender comes in. As part of the engineering, the final engineering that has to take place, I believe the engineers are going to do their best to try and come up with an example. I know they're loath to come up with an estimated price at this stage of the game because it's a very difficult pricing, especially when lumber prices are good for 10 days. It makes their job quite difficult. And if I were to guess, I would say that they're going to go way on the high side. So no engineer likes to be wrong. So it's until we actually tender the project, which will be probably the first part of September. It's a guessing game.
Okay. Paul, did you have any insight on that or any further? Hearing. Yep. Can't get unmuted. Okay. All right. Oh. Nope.
Oh.
Okay. If there's no other questions on the phase 2 report, the phone is muted, Paul.
I think it's *6 to unmute, Paul. I think it's *6 maybe to unmute, but I don't know.
Looks like
Anyway.
Okay. All right. You might have to give, yeah, okay. All right. So going back to Ron's report for phase 2, if there's no other further discussion on that, if I could get a motion to receive that report for information, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor. And that's carried. Okay. I did see the little unmute go off there for a second, Paul. did you want to try that again?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yes.
It's these morning meetings. I don't know. No, Ron basically said exactly what I was going to say. Thank you. And I know, we've even had updates when since we first applied for the funding. So I'm sure there's bound to be updates again.
Well, Madam Mayor, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. There you go. Okay, moving on to finance. Catherine.
The only thing I had to mention that is the 2021 tax rate bylaw is in the list for approval at this meeting. That's it.
Great. Any questions for Catherine at this time? Planning. Dan, good morning. Thanks for joining us again this morning.
The chair, thanks, Madam Mayor and members of council. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So we have two items on the agenda today. So the first one being a part lot control exemption bylaw, which is for Questcapade Land Developments Incorporated. This may look a bit familiar to council. They did receive part lot control exemption on August 9th of 2019, after submission of a deposited reference plan with the Land Registry's office. They did unfortunately fail to actually register the lots. And since the exemption has expired as of February 13th, 2020. So what they are looking for, same in this particular instance as last time, is exemption from basically the subdivision process to establish 10 single detached residential lots on Old Clover Drive. So it's the portion, block 30, which is on the west side of Old Clover Drive, is you just kind of come in off of Richmond Street. So the deposited reference plan is still there with the registry's office and does include a legal description for the proposed lots, along with the easements that will be conveyed to the township, which will facilitate the rear yard catch basins. So upon adoption, the bylaw will then be considered by the Middlesex County Director of Planning, just so everyone's aware, who is the delegated authority for the part lot control exemptions. So at this time, I am recommending that the part lot control exemption bylaw, which has been prepared for those lands, be approved by Township Council, and that it be forwarded on to the county for consideration. So thanks, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions on that report from Dan or recommendation? Deputy Mayor.
Are those the units that are going to be rentals?
Through the chair, I believe the original intention was for them to be rental units. I'm not sure if they still intend for those to be rentals. By the sounds of it, it does appear that they would prefer to sell the units at this point.
So then we don't, yeah, because I've had some people ask me, and then even myself, I'm curious. So that land and that, whether it be a rental or a house, or whether it be a rental or to sell, during that construction and build, the developer can just decide, and it's not something we can control or approve at the time. Then it sounds like from your answer.
Through the chair, no, yeah, you're correct. The part lot, like the exemption is required regardless, or sorry, part lot control would be required regardless to actually establish the lots to allow for the single detached dwellings to be, I guess, habitable at the end of the day. So whether it be rental or ownership is not necessarily something that we can control.
They would just need to have their proper, for resale, obviously it'd be properly, I just can't think of the name right now, that the builders have to carry for resale, I think, but okay.
Sure, yeah, no, you're correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the report? Okay, so there is a bylaw that we will pass at the end of the meeting, but there is the recommendation to approve the bylaw. So I would just ask for a verbal motion to accept Dan's recommendation at this point. Councillor Regan.
Motion to accept.
And a seconder, please. Councillor Westman. And all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, and the next report. Dan.
So through the chair again, this particular report is, or the purpose of the report is to evaluate the request for site plan approval to facilitate the residential development of 44 townhouse dwelling units that are located in Ridge Crossing as part of their phase 2 land development, which is essentially the last lands left in that region. So, as shown as the attached map, the lands are on the west side of Miller Drive and on the south side of Nicholson Street. They are proposing a 9 townhouse block development, which is effectively 44 townhouse dwelling units altogether. The property is zoned in R3-6 and does contain a hold, which does permit the townhouse dwelling units. So the developer has applied for site plan approval where a series of plans and drawings have been submitted and reviewed by the township as well as our consulting engineers for acceptance. For site plan approval, there is no public consultation requirement under the Planning Act, and that the developer is the only one that technically has a right to appeal. The report does contemplate that the development of the remaining, that this is the development remaining of phase 2. We are satisfied based on the review of the plans that they have met all the requirements of site plan approval and zoning and are in support of the development in general. And we do note that township legal counsel has drafted the agreement. The owner in this particular case has signed the agreement and has also secured the agreement. So at this point in time, we would be waiting for council direction to sign the agreement. So with that said, the recommendation attached to the report is that pass a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the site plan agreement for the lands legally described as Block 103 on registered plan 33M739, provided that site plan agreement is to the satisfaction of the town legal counsel. So thank you, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions on this one.
Great, thank you very much for that, Dan. Questions on this in front of us? What's in front of us? Deputy Mayor Manders.
It's not necessarily about this, but I guess it's going to be a question on reflection of this, and a ratepayer's comment at one of our meetings was that Lucan Biddulph's not running out of clay and space, and it's the density and again disappointment. I just we are Ontario and ourselves and our head of council. We it's nonstop healthy community, walking, biking, everything. This very dense complex from what I can see, and in the future, just we continue to talk, but we don't seem to be doing the walk. Like, I don't believe there's a bike path, a place to walk to get out of that place. It just, why do we miss that, or what are we doing wrong? Like, it doesn't seem like the roads there have got an area to bike out of, to walk, to do anything. We just seem to be talking a lot. So I don't know.
I see Jeff's hand up. Jeff, do you have a comment to that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I know, and obviously this is an important topic, I think, for council. And when we move forward with developments, this, we are looking at creating more green space and trails and all sorts of new, called infrastructure. Part of that is developing guidelines in our boulevards and what we want to see accomplished in developments. In this case, and before, and Dan can comment, this portion of the ridge crossing, it's the finishing up of what was basically started years ago. And that design that you're seeing come across right now is basically has been worked on in the last couple of years. So we were tied to an image that we started years ago. I think going forward with some of the newer developments that we're just bringing on, or not even bringing online, that are just starting to come across our desk, I think that's where we have to start looking at what our boulevards and what our developments are going to look like. So we're kind of and I think the key here is that this is the finishing up of the Timber Ridge one. But I understand what you're coming from, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, no, that's, I guess, and that's where I said, for me, it's a reflection of hopefully not to do things this way in the future compared to our talks that we seem to have talk every month or every week in comments that we make in council and in Ontario. And to me, again, we're in an interesting opportunity, our whole group here on designation and future residential land. I think to really make an impact and a change, because this, so, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dan, yeah.
Through the chair, yeah, maybe I'll just add a bit, and we've kind of danced around this topic before in the past, and it really relates back to, so when you look at vacant land condos and townhouse development sites and even apartment sites, those are typically private road infrastructure, so they're not built to municipal standards. They don't include sidewalks and the likes. They're much more narrow than our streets that we have, right? So and they build them to a certain standard, which would not meet municipal standard for roadway. So what you may consider from the township's perspective is further exploring the idea of something in your official plan or in an urban design guideline, which would steer how you want to see these developments take place in the future. Because at this particular point in time, you really don't have anything concrete that says you have to do these things for like bike paths or separated barrier-free walkways or even visitor parking in this instance. We did obviously push back and ask for the visitor parking and the barrier-free parking in this particular development, but it's not even required in your current zoning. So I think, there is a potential good opportunity here, especially if you're going to see a lot more of this style of development. This is certainly where the province is directing us. This is where they want us to go. They want to see more intensified developments. And it makes sense given current housing shortages and prices that we're seeing at this point in time. So there may be a really good opportunity here to, develop some urban design standards and encapsulate that into your official plans. That does require developers to go a little bit further beyond what you typically see in these private site developments. So I'm all for barrier-free separated sidewalks, or trees, or visitor parking. I think that just makes good sense when it comes to developing these types of subdivisions. I agree with you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Dan. I think what, you started your comments by saying we've danced around this a few times, and I would agree on that. To the Deputy Mayor's point, we talk a good talk, and as I've said a number of times, and it's no excuse, when this particular subdivision was approved, I certainly didn't have the sort of background that I've been able to gain in now my years on council. And, there is something to say about, experience on council, seeing things from the start of a project to the end of the project, to see exactly what it's going to look like, and things that, maybe you should have considered that you weren't, you didn't envision that. So, you know, and when you think about how Lucan has grown and the sort of growth that we've experienced for years, you know, that didn't happen. And so maybe that vision wasn't there. So I think going forward, I'm thinking that, you know, the faces around the horseshoe will have more of a keen eye to maybe pushing for those sort of things and you know, making more out of our community than maybe what we're offering today. So thank you for those comments, Dave. Any other questions or comments on this particular report? Council Mastrakis.
Should we look at forming a urban development committee so that assists in the process of developing a plan and use it with the official plan? Is that so? Instead of just talking it, would that be kind of the walking part that Deputy Dave was at Manders? Was that what you were thinking about?
I was thinking you're going to say Deputy Dog when you say Deputy Dave, but anyways, that's showing my age on that one. I don't know who wants to take that.
I'd like to comment on top of that and then hear staff, if that's okay, Madam Mayor.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I really wonder if certainly after the designation of the future residential land and because as if nobody knows where it's going to be in our whole community, nobody has a clue where it's going to be other than what's submitted. And there's been 500 acres submitted. So probably, I think that'll be a good idea to form a committee or a working group or something like that when our staff and planners really figure out the best location for future growth of Lucan Biddulph. I think we're maybe a little early today to set that up, but I think we need, maybe, I don't know if we put it on Business Arising, but I think we're getting close to maybe having that kind of input from the community and maybe having almost like your PRAC committee, if that's what you mean, Mastrakis, Mr. Yeah, Councillor.
I don't know if I see Paul's hand up, but maybe before I pivot to Paul, if Dan or Ron have a comment about this line of discussion.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I was just going to say that we've been talking internally about updating the design guidelines and construction standards. So maybe that's, if I could make a suggestion, maybe that's the starting point. Let Jeff and Dan sort of get that underway, and then we've got something for a committee possibly to chew on if council chooses to take it further than what that document would suggest. Is that? I'm looking to Dan and Jeff for a yes or a no.
Yeah, so through the chair, I mean, from Ron's perspective, yeah, that's definitely very applicable to a situation where your roads and infrastructure are going to be owned by the municipality at the end of the day. Those design documents are more geared towards the public ownership side, not necessarily on the private side for development. They do obviously include standards that need to be met, or at least minimum standards that need to be met. I would say likely, at least in terms of my experience, I don't know, maybe Jeff can comment further, they usually don't go beyond the minimum widths required in things like the Ontario Building Code for fire access to a private, but they certainly could. The way from a planning perspective that you may consider moving forward is, sure you may have seen it elsewhere. Middlesex Center certainly has a really good opportunity to, especially if you've got centralized development that tends to occur in a specific area. You could make, Lucan, the entire village of Lucan is an area of a secondary plan. And in that secondary plan, you include additional standards for development in your official plan that are required for developers to meet. From there, you can then develop your urban design guidelines, which more relate to the private site and private sides as to how you want to see development occur on, say, like a vacant land condos. So that would be the planning side of how that would work.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, and I make from engineering, you know, we can develop a design boulevard design standard, which would lay out sidewalks and as Dan commented, if we wanted trees on the boulevard, we can do a lot of that as the streets, or as the developments are built. But I think just a comment that I would have is we can do that, and that'll lead to the engineering. But we also have to look at the big picture of if we do want a trail system through town, do we and as this official plan is coming through to council, where are we going to develop and how's that going to look also has a bearing on how this is all going to play out. So it's all kind of pieces that'll come together. So we got planning, we got engineer, but we also got the bigger picture of the urban boundary. We've got the parks and rec plan. So these are all things that have to all work together. And if we have to keep adjusting as we go, I think that's the key. And whether it's a working group that has to bring it all together, like I can bring some design standards. I think we need, we'll probably have to look at, some outside help with some of those design standards and boulevards and that sort of thing. But I can bring that forward, but to bring it all in as a puzzle, I think it certainly would not, certainly would be benefit to have a working group of some sort, in my opinion.
Paul?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize for technical difficulties, but as the deputy mayor had stated earlier, part of that piece of puzzle, thanks, Jeff, that was a perfect analogy, is that the trails, a trails committee being officially put together by the township is one of the next steps in our Parks and Rec master plan. And trails aren't just trails out in the woods. Part of that is connectivity and accessibility throughout the town. So I think another piece of that puzzle, connecting it back to, say, as you said, Deputy Mayor, the PRAC committee, is that formalizing an actual trails committee would actually, they'd have the public input of that aspect to we could maybe have representatives once that's put together to join that working group as input.
Okay, lots of good discussion there. I think those are really good points, that this report has kind of elevated our sense of, thinking beyond what's going to be in front of us over the next little bit. So pleased with how that's gone. And did we want to put that on business arising, or are we okay with it just being kind of out there? What's the thought there? From a staff Peter?
And I'll leave it to staff, but my thought was maybe getting a report back from staff on best options and best direction on this. Would that be good? Or
yeah, like I think just maybe highlighting or condensing everything, all the information that was just shared, and what staff sees as the next steps going forward. Maybe that can be produced in the next coming month or so, months.
Yeah, to me, I like that idea for what Peter just said there. I just agree, to me, we are in an interesting situation, our group, so that at the end of these build outs that our staff and our planner and ourselves are all going to be part of our next 25 years of growth, is that I've got no issue with high density, but what's been created in Lucan Biddulph has been high density, no activity. And that's what these places basically are. And what we need to do is, land is expensive, but also it is, having an active community appears to be important to ourselves in Ontario. And that to me is the creation going forward. What's done is done. So I do, that's kind of where I was going with my initial comments. So, but I think a report on trying to really capture that in the early stages is going to be very important for our group and staff. So,
Ron?
Madam Mayor, to sort of expand on Dan's suggestion there, with regards to the secondary plan. Maybe what we can do is put it on the business rising, and staff can look to bring forward a report, outlining what that looks like. Is there a cost attached to it, and all the various aspects of it? So if that's acceptable to council, we'll put it on the business rising, and staff at our next staff meeting, a bi-weekly planning meeting we have, we can talk about how we move this forward and bring that back to council. Okay.
Perfect. So circling back to the report that spurned this discussion, if there's no other questions on the specific report, there is a recommendation, and I would just ask for a verbal one to accept the recommendation, and then the subsequent bylaw will follow. Deputy Mayor, to accept the recommendation, and Councillor Regan, seconded. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, Public Works.
Good morning, Madam Mayor. Just a verbal update today. The first one is on the construction projects in town. Frank Street is on schedule. So far, no issues to report. It's moving along. It's very chaotic down there, but it's moving along as we thought it would. So that's good. Saintsbury and Richmond lights are proceeding. Again, I think it's proceeding as scheduled. We did have a meeting last week on site with the MTO County Township and Mr. Clark to discuss his property and entranceways and that sort of thing. It seems to be moving forward as we thought. So that's good. An update, generally at this time of year, we're doing grading and prepping for gravel maintenance, which is taking place. We are keeping, due to COVID, to essential services, although there is just activities that do have to take place at this time of year, so that we're being very selective in how that works. So the guys are figuring that all out. Having said that, that leads into the update on the flower program, because at this time of year, we begin to prep the beds. They'll start to grow weeds. We have to prep the beds for everything to be planted the first part of June. So next week, we're going to look at starting that program. Obviously, it has to at some point start getting rolling. So we'll be looking at bringing our new employee on. I welcome Carrie Trebner. She'll be working in the flower program, and she's to take over Brian's position, as Brian has indicated he is retiring. He's going to mentor for the start of the season and get things up and going, and then Carrie and Marty, who works with us, will carry on the program as it has in the past. The only other update I have, or the only other piece of news for council, is that we did have a request for an improvement for the 1984 Hardy. And the 1984 Hardy drain is a drain that runs from basically the Corsi line, runs in behind the arena through the park, and touches the properties over by Colin Haskett's and some of the landowners over that border on the road allowance of Community Drive. This has an effect that if we ever do want to open Community Drive, we have to look at this drain, as it'll take our storm water. So that is being initiated. That has been asked for an improvement with the connection to the Asabo Fields development. So later in the council meeting, you will see a resolution come forward to appoint Frietz as the engineer. So I just wanted to give council the information on why and how that has come about. So other than that, I'll just open it up if there's any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And certainly I know that council will join me in welcoming Carrie as part of the Public Works, Lucan Biddulph flower team. So that's awesome. Good news. Any questions or comments for Jeff? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just related to the construction at Sainsbury and 4 and the detour going down Langford. I just wanted to point out there was some concerns, 2 or 3 emails I got from residents just about that diverted traffic. So I just wanted to thank Public Works for getting right on it, Jeff and your staff, for putting that digital speed sign there and taking care of those concerns for those residents. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions for Public Works? Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Paul, Parks and Rec.
Thank you to you, Madam Mayor. Apologize once again for the technical difficulties. I don't usually have them, but here we go. To double back from before when we had the issue with the microphone, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee was intending to meet this week. However, there's a lot of things wrapping up this week, so I have pushed to the committee to meet at the beginning of next week. As soon as we have the either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday determined, we'll have that posted on our social media and website right away for anyone who wishes to observe. Other than that, coming back to the business arising, both Catherine and myself have had a few conversations about the chiller efficiency report. It's been difficult as we haven't really had many normal months. So instead of having the April deadline, we were wanting to push to ask for council maybe to push that to the fall, because we might have a few better dates to compare once we hopefully we come out of this stay-at-home order, everything's going well, and we can have at least a month or 2 of normal operation that we can compare it to. Other than that, lifeguards, we are still in the same situation as before. Abby and myself have been looking around as best we can. We've reached out to the Stony Creek YMCA as we, right now their lifeguards are all laid off. Maybe some of them may be looking for temporary work. It has not had any success yet. We're still looking. I know surrounding municipalities have just finished up their hiring process, and a lot of them have notified the unsuccessful candidates that Lucan Biddulph is still looking for lifeguards. There's many great candidates they've had. They just only had so many that they could hire, so hopefully we will see some of those. Other than that, the playground surveys are going out today for community involvement to see the community's opinion on the play structures that were submitted for, well, down to the top 6 for both the community center and Grant and Play structures. I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised with some of the submissions. And once we get those eliminated down to the top 3, we'll be submitting them to the county AODA for final comment before making our final selection on the scoring scales. So we'll hopefully have that by the end of the week. The Tree Canada contacted us. The grant that we had put in for the community forest, unfortunately due to COVID-19, there was a huge delay in their funding opportunities, and they weren't able to secure funding to support our project. However, they did advise highly that we should reapply in the fall, as our project scored very high with them, and they thought it was the perfect kind of idea for what they support. So they suggested highly in the fall that we should reapply, and hopefully their fundings will reopen back up. The community gardens at Lucan Biddulph, they're getting raring to go again. Last year we had a lot of interest. We ended up adding in some extra plots. They weren't completely used up, and part of that, to avoid weeds growing in them, the community gardeners planted produce, and they were able to donate 270 pounds of food to the Exeter, Elsie Craig, and North London food banks. And it's an initiative that they're hoping to do again this year. So they're excited to get going on that. And then I think other than that, we're just carrying on as normal. The hogweed, it's starting to come up again this year. So we've been out with the ABCA. It's still rather small. So they want us to go back in a couple weeks to check for plants because we don't want to miss any, and so there's not a double spray, it'd be a single spray. So anyone that's in the Campanelli area, please be advised to keep an eye out for hogweed. We're going to be posting a notice to the social media once again, just to remind people what the plant looks like and to avoid it. So anyone who backs onto the bend drain there, just please be advised. And that is all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Paul. Questions or comments for Paul at this time? Okay, thanks for that update, Paul. Lisa, Economic Development.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a report before you regarding the community improvement plan. We met last week to discuss potential projects and initiatives that we could do for 2021. After discussing these sort of things, given the fact that we're in the middle of the year, COVID and various things, we thought it'd be a great time to actually just move forward on developing a couple of those plans that were identified in the actual plan. So one was the accessibility audit, and the other one was streetscape design concept plan. It's kind of a good thing to get those kind of in front of us before, I would say, applications start coming in 2022, so that we have some guidelines to evaluate some of these applications that may come forward in the new year. Part of that, though, we still want to offer some grants to our businesses, and we would continue on with the kind of grant we've been offering the last few years of downtown revitalization, so signage.
Well,
a little bit this year, and then when come 2020, that we're really ready to move forward with the CIP in a stronger way. So, thank you.
So Lisa, you just glitched out there for a sec.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just right when you were talking about our normal grant program. So just if you can just highlight.
Sure. Yeah. So we were recommending that we're going to continue on with this type of downtown grant program that we've had the last 2 years. If we assess, $3,500 towards that, and our businesses can continue with the same sort of projects they've been used to doing for the last 2 years. And then come 2022, we're ready to go full force in the CIP and open up some applications for other projects.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions on that report and the recommendation in front of you for going forward?
Sorry, and yeah, so the recommendation is that we keep the budget we kind of already assigned to it. And speaking sort of informally with our consultants that we hired to do the CIP, they felt that was kind of
okay. Well,
a lot of money. It's more design. Like how do we want it to look and feel? And then when these kind of projects start to happen, they can be one-off.
Okay. So you glitched out there again.
Sorry.
So I don't know. I don't think that this is a good sign for daytime council meetings.
No. I think we have so many users.
I know, exactly. I think you were exactly all the daytime users of internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you were saying that the consultant's recommendation was to kind of get these reports under our belt, so it would provide us opportunity to kind of decide what our grants look like in the future, and that was well within the budget that we have allotted for this year.
Yeah, and like I'm not sure if you got the part where I said like the design, the streetscape design would be very more of a conceptual plan, not engineering, not really specific into how that would work. And I think when we do a certain thing at a certain time, that's when the engineering will click in, and we do it as a one-off.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Questions or comments on that? Okay, there is a motion later on that we can deal with towards the end of the meeting. Did you have anything else, Lisa?
No, that's fine. Thank you for now.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Mastarakis.
Just a question, would this mean we may need more money for broadband?
Yes.
I know, all of a sudden, you know, maybe we are in an underserviced area, even though we've been deemed not to be, but maybe we could work on that. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on then to councillor comments. Councillor Westman.
Okay, I just wanted to update council on the fundraising efforts that we've been doing in the village of Granton for getting ourselves the radar speed signs. During the process of the fundraising, we got a lot of response. It was overwhelming and amazing and really heartwarming. So what has happened is we've had some interest from the public and from the donors to actually acquire 2 signs, and we've raised the full amount required for that. I think some of the logic was it would be better to have a sign on either end of town, because whether you're coming in from the north or coming in from the south, the speeds are pretty high, and it is equally affecting people. So if we had one sign, we'd have to keep moving it around, whereas there was a lot of support and we were able to raise enough to get 2 signs. So I'm understanding that I have to ask council for their support to acquire the second sign, because it's a part of our asset management you know, for the long-term you know, use, maintenance, and upkeep of the second sign. So, but we had some amazing support from the public, a lot of individuals donating money, and we had 2 groups, the Granton Park Committee being the largest donor, and they're always tremendous, respectful supporters of the community. They're unstoppable. They're really wonderful. And also the Lucan Optimists came in and donated, and a local business, our heating and cooling guy, were very generous, as well as a lot of local residents. So just looking for council's support to acquire the second sign, and then that'll give Jeff the ability to use the funds that we've collected to make the order. So that's my request.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Westman. Comments on that? Councillor Reagan, did you have a comment or a question?
I was just wondering if, just really quick, is that something that we do a motion on later on, just to support Councillor Westman's request? And then I do have a comment.
Yeah, I'll be asking for a motion one way or the other, but if we can have the discussion first as to whether or not council support the 2 signs. Did you have a comment? Did you?
I would support that, yes.
So you didn't have a comment?
I will have a councillor comment, but after we're done with Councillor Westman. Sorry. But yes, I totally support Councillor Westman's request.
Okay. Jeff, I think I saw your hand up. Given that we only asked the county for 1 sign, I guess we'd have to go back to the county to get permission for 2. Is that something that you think that they'd be okay with, especially for that kind of short piece of property or roadway?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, yes, yeah, and I have talked to the county, and this just a comment that I have is gaining support throughout the county. Tim Center's looking at a similar application. These signs are, the communities are seeing them as a desirable sign. So Chris, we did have that discussion last week. As long as they're in their appropriate place, and as long as they, we still have to get approval for their location. The county at this point, they're in a, I don't want to say they promote them, but they have no issues with the signs going up in the appropriate position. So yeah, I don't see it being a problem at the county level. And I just wanted to comment that I think it's great. The only comment I would say, and I did say this, is it does create a bit of a service level that we have now that we put these 2 signs up. So I just wanted to say that I think it's a good idea. And I think as the residents out there, they see it as a benefit to the community. So, but I just wanted to say that Once we put the signs up, there is a level of service that once they're installed is my one comment towards items like this.
Thanks for that. Jeff, any other comments with regards to Councillor Westman's request? I guess, you know, congratulations to the Granton community. I mean, good on them for being able to raise that kind of money in a short order of time. I think the concern that I have with that, it's a little different in that you've got a standalone community, for lack of a better description. But I wonder if in allowing for these sort of requests and fundraising initiatives, are we setting ourselves up for, you know, the community of Ridge Crossing to come together and, you know, have similar requests, similar fundraising, that sort of thing. And I mean, potentially then you could have these sort of signs on almost every long street sort of thing. And is that a concern that we're setting ourselves up for having to entertain these sort of community requests all the time and have to respond to fundraising that our residents have taken on their own? I think we just need to be mindful of that. So, but congratulations to the Granton community on that. So with that, I'm assuming Councillor Westman, and maybe this is wrong, but that you'd like to put that motion on the table to purchase the second one. Okay, and then a seconder for that. Councillor Regan, and all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Did you have any other comments, Alex, or was that it? Okay, Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, I wasn't going to comment until Councillor Westman commented. I know that sometimes we hear that we're losing that small town feel. And I'm going to challenge people now that anytime you feel that or you want to say that, you should listen to Councillor Westman's councillor comments, because I think every time he comes on, there's always some sort of feel-good story about our community. So I don't think we're losing the small town feel at all. It's not about buildings, it's about people. So I thank Councillor Westman for bringing those up every meeting. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Daniel, for acknowledging that. I'm sure Councillor Westman appreciates that. Any other councillor comments? Okay, no changes to budget? Any notices of motion? Okay, then we will move on to our motions in front of us. Resolved that the Township of Lucan Biddulph appoint Spreet Associates London Limited under Section 4 or 78 of the Drainage Act to prepare a drainage report for the requested work to the Hardy Drain 1984, subject to the required 30 days notice to the applicable conservation authority. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Resolved that report number EDC-06-2021 be received, and that council direct staff to issue a request for proposals for the development of an accessibility audit and streetscape design concept plan as recommended by the Community Improvement Plan. And further, that council approve the Downtown Beautification Grant Program in the amount of $3,500 for the 2021 calendar year. A mover and seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. Resolved that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed, and that they be numbered 33-2021 Road Dedication Bylaw, Ridge Crossing Phase 1 and 1B, 34-2021 Part Lot Control Exemption for Old Clover Village Block 30, 35-2021 the execution of site plan agreement for Ridge Crossing Townhomes Phase 2, 36-2021 the tax rate bylaw, and 37-2021 the confirming bylaw. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. And resolve that the council meeting be adjourned at 10:54 a.m. Mover and seconder. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Have a great